All right, Yellow Group, it's the last day of the worst day of my life. Before you get started, before we get started reading, think about all the things that have happened so far in the story. Think about the beginning. In the beginning, his mom told him to hurry up. They were getting ready for a fancy party. Little Bill didn't like the clothes that he was wearing. And then people started showing up for this fancy party. Did you figure out what this fancy party is yet? I have a guess as to what it is. I can definitely tell it's pretty fancy or dressed up because even the guests that came to the party were dressed really nicely. All right, in the middle, he was also had to talk to some people that made him feel a little uncomfortable just because he was embarrassed and annoyed by their questions. So now we're going to find out what happens at the end of the story. Before we do that, I'm going to go over just a couple of things with you. So this word fine can mean a couple things. So you have to be careful about the context of what the author is saying in the story. So in this part of the story, Little Bill runs into a couple of his friends and they say, "Wow, Little Bill, you look fine." And that is a slang kind of a term saying that you look really good. You're all cleaned up, you look snazzy. There are two character names that are in the story that might be a little difficult for you guys to read. This is Jose. So in the Spanish language, you don't say that the J is kind of like an H. So it's Jose. And the other character in the story that comes into play is Kiku. So we have Jose and Kiku, and then the vocabulary word fine, but it's the context that word is used in the story. As we read the last chapter in this book, I want you to think about the illustrator does something and adds these thought bubbles in the story, and I want you to think about why they're important to explaining the story. All right, chapter 5. So think about how this story ended. I thought it really interesting that in the part of the story it said, if you know me, you know that this is the part of the story where I usually mess up. So it leads to me to think that Little Bill kind of tends to get into trouble sometimes. And I think for this day, he was trying really hard not to get in trouble. What do you think about these bubbles, or these thought bubbles that the illustrator added for the story? It really helped you understand what the author was saying in the story, and helped with the comprehension of the story. I wonder if you actually know what these little black bubbly stuff on top of crackers is actually called. I bet your mom or dad would know, so ask them if they know what it is. Do you think that Little Bill made the right decision at the end of the story not to kick the soccer ball? He really wanted to kick that soccer ball. It said that his toes were twitching and his legs were itching and all the muscles in his body were saying, kick the ball. But he didn't. What is a lesson that you could learn from Little Bill from this story? Did we ever figure out what the big event was in this story? I assumed it was a wedding because the author talked about the basketball hoop was decorated like a wedding dress and Dad saying, here comes the bride. But I'm not really sure. We never really saw a wedding. Maybe it's a big birthday party. I hope you liked the book. Remember, go back and reread it a couple of times to practice your fluency.